The pregnancy test trembled in my hands, 2 pink lines mocking me with their cheerful hue. I should have been overjoyed, but all I felt was dread. How could I bring a child into this mess? Emily? Jane's voice floated up the stairs. Are you all right in there? I quickly wrapped the test in toilet paper and shoved it deep into the trash can. I'm fine, I called back, my voice steadier than I felt. Just a bit of morning sickness. Jane, my sister-in-law and unexpected roommate, was waiting for me at the bottom of the stairs, her brow furrowed with concern. You look pale. Maybe you should see a doctor? It's nothing, I insisted, forcing a smile. Probably just something I ate. Jane's eyes narrowed, but she didn't push. That was one of the things I appreciated about her. She knew when to back off. Unlike her brother, my estranged husband Richard, who couldn't take a hint if it slapped him in the face. Well, if you're sure, Jane said, heading towards the kitchen. I made some ginger tea, if you'd like. It might help settle your stomach. I followed her, grateful for the distraction. Thanks, Jane. I don't know what I'd do without you. She turned, a sad smile on her face. That's what family's for, right? We stick together, no matter what. If only she knew how those words would come back to haunt us both. As I sipped the tea, my phone buzzed. Richard's name flashed on the screen, and I felt my stomach clench. I declined the call, earning a questioning look from Jane. He's been calling a lot lately, she said, her tone carefully neutral. I set the mug down with more force than necessary. He can keep calling. I'm not ready to talk to him. Jane nodded, but I caught a flicker of something in her eyes. Guilt? Worry? Before I could analyze it further, she changed the subject. I was thinking of heading to the farmer's market later. Want to come? The thought of facing crowds made my head spin. I think I'll pass, but could you pick up some of those strawberries I like? Of course, Jane said, grabbing her purse. Anything else? I shook my head, and she headed out, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the secret growing inside me. As soon as the door closed, I slumped against the kitchen counter. How had my life become such a disaster? 6 months ago, I'd been happily married, planning for our future. Now, I was living with my sister-in-law, pregnant and alone. I wandered into the guest room, my room now, and collapsed on the bed. My hand drifted to my still flat stomach. How was I going to tell Richard? Should I even tell him at all? A soft ping from my laptop caught my attention. I'd left my email open, and a new message had arrived. From Richard. My finger hovered over the delete button, but curiosity won out. Em, please talk to me. I know I messed up, but we can fix this. I miss you. I love you. Come home. Tears pricked at my eyes. Part of me wanted to believe him, to run back into his arms and pretend nothing had happened. But I couldn't forget the lipstick on his collar, the late nights at the office, the way he'd pull away when I tried to touch him. I was about to close the laptop when something caught my eye. A folder I didn't recognize, tucked away in a corner of the desktop. Jane's recipes, it said. Odd. Jane wasn't much of a cook. Curiosity got the better of me. I clicked on the folder, expecting to find a collection of Pinterest links or scanned index cards. Instead, I found myself staring at a series of emails. Emails between Jane and Richard. Emails full of pet names and inside jokes. Emails detailing secret meetups and passionate encounters. My vision blurred as I read message after message, each one driving the knife deeper into my heart. The dates stretched back months, long before Richard and I had separated. The front door opened, and I heard Jane's cheerful voice. Emily, I'm back. I got those strawberries you wanted. I slammed the laptop shut, my mind reeling. How could they do this to me? How long had this been going on? As Jane's footsteps approached, I made a split-second decision. I wouldn't confront her. Not yet. I needed time to think, to plan. Because one thing was crystal clear. Jane wasn't the supportive sister-in-law I thought she was. And I was done being the victim in this story. It was time for Emily to fight back. I spent the night tossing and turning, the weight of Jane's betrayal crushing my chest. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I couldn't live under the same roof as that snake for another day. As I stumbled into the kitchen, Jane was already there, humming as she poured coffee. Morning, Em. How are you feeling today? The cheerful facade made my blood boil. I slammed my mug on the counter, making her jump. Cut the act, Jane. I know everything. Her smile faltered. What are you taltered? What are you talking about? I saw the emails, I spat. Between you and Richard, how long has it been going on? Months? Years? The color drained from Jane's face. Emily, I can explain. Save it, I snarled. I trusted you. You were supposed to be my family. Jane reached for me, her eyes brimming with tears. We never meant to hurt you. It just happened. I jerked away from her touch. Get out now. But Emily, where will I go? I laughed bitterly. I don't care. Go to Richard. You two deserve each other. As Jane scrambled to pack her things, I retreated to my room, shaking with rage and grief. I needed someone on my side, someone I could trust. I grabbed my phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. Abby, it's Em. I need you. An hour later, I was sitting in Abigail's cozy living room, spilling out the whole sordid tale. My oldest friend listened, her face a mix of shock and fury. Those lying, cheating bastards, Abby growled when I finished. Em, I'm so sorry. I wiped away tears I hadn't realized were falling. I don't know what to do, Abby. I'm pregnant, alone, and I've lost everything. Abby's eyes hardened with determination. No, you haven't. You've still got me, and we're going to make those two pay for what they've done. I blinked, surprised by the venom in her voice. What do you mean? A slow, wicked smile spread across Abby's face. I mean, it's time for a little revenge, honey. They think they can walk all over you? Let's show them how wrong they are. Part of me recoiled at the idea. I'd never been the type for revenge. But another part, a darker part I barely recognized, thrilled at the thought of making Richard and Jane suffer like I had. What did you have in mind? I asked, leaning forward. Abby's grin widened. First things first, we need to gather evidence. Those emails are a good start, but we need more. Phone records, credit card statements, anything that proves their affair. I nodded, my mind racing. Richard's always been careless with his phone. I bet I could get into it if I had the chance. Perfect, Abby said, and Jane's bound to slip up eventually. We just need to be patient and watch for our moment. As Abby outlined her plan, I felt a strange mix of excitement and fear. This wasn't like me. I'd always been the peacemaker, the one who avoided conflict. But the thought of Richard and Jane getting away with their betrayal made my blood boil. What about the baby? I asked, my hand instinctively going to my stomach. I don't want to drag my child into this mess. Abby's expression softened. We'll protect the little one, Em. But think about it. Don't you want your baby to have a mother who stands up for herself, who doesn't let people walk all over her? I hesitated, torn between my desire for justice and my fear of the unknown. I don't know, Abby. This all feels so wrong. What's wrong is what they did to you, Abby insisted. You're not the bad guy here, Em. You're just fighting back. As I left Abby's house that evening, my head was spinning with possibilities. Part of me was terrified of what we were planning, but another part, a part that grew stronger with each passing minute, was ready for war. I unlocked my phone, my finger hovering over Richard's number. It was time to set the wheels in motion. Richard? I said when he answered, forcing a tremor into my voice. Can we talk? I think I'm ready to work things out. As I hung up, I caught my reflection in a store window. The woman staring back at me looked different, harder, more determined. Emily the doormat was gone. Emily the Avenger had taken her place. And Richard and Jane wouldn't know what hit them. The next few weeks were a blur of secret meetings and clandestine phone calls. I played my part perfectly, convincing Richard and Jane that I was oblivious to their betrayal. Meanwhile, I was gathering evidence like a woman possessed. You're doing great, Em, Abby whispered as we huddled over my laptop, reviewing the latest batch of incriminating emails I'd managed to forward from Richard's account. They don't suspect a thing. I nodded, feeling a mix of pride and guilt. I never thought I'd be good at deception. Abby squeezed my hand. It's not deception. It's survival. Remember that. The weight of my growing belly reminded me of the stakes. This wasn't just about me anymore. One afternoon, I overheard Richard on the phone with Jane. My heart raced as I fumbled to set up the recording app Abby had installed on my phone. Can't keep this up forever, Richard was saying. Emily's bound to find out eventually. Jane's voice crackled through the speaker. So what if she does? She's got nowhere else to go. She needs us. I bit back a bitter laugh. If only they knew. The conversation continued, revealing details of their affair and their plans for the future, plans that didn't include me or my baby. By the time Richard hung up, my hands were shaking with rage and triumph. I had them. The next day, I met with Sarah Goldstein, the cutthroat divorce attorney Abby had recommended. Well, Mrs. Harrison, Sarah said, reviewing the evidence I'd gathered, I'd say you have a very strong case here. Infidelity, emotional abuse, potential alienation of affection. We can make things very uncomfortable for your husband. I leaned forward, my voice steady. And custody. What about my baby? Sarah's eyes softened slightly. Given the circumstances, I don't foresee any issues with you obtaining primary custody. We'll make sure your child is protected. As I left Sarah's office, a wave of nausea hit me. Morning sickness, or the weight of what I was about to do. I stumbled to a nearby bench, trying to catch my breath. Emily? A familiar voice made me freeze. I looked up to see Jane approaching, her face a mask of concern. Are you all right? What are you doing in this part of town? I forced a smile, my mind racing. Oh, just a checkup with my new OB/GYN. The office moved recently. Jane's eyes narrowed slightly, but her voice remained syrupy sweet. You should have told me. I would have come with you. You know how worried Richard and I have been about you and the baby. The mention of Richard's name in the same breath as my child made my stomach churn. I stood up, perhaps too quickly. I'm fine, Jane. Really, I should get going. As I turned to leave, Jane caught my arm. Wait, there's something I've been meaning to talk to you about. About Richard and me. For a moment, I thought she was going to confess. My heart pounded as I waited for the admission, the apology, anything that might make this easier. But Jane just smiled, her grip on my arm tightening slightly. We're so glad you're giving him another chance. Family is everything, right? I nodded mechanically, unable to trust my voice. As Jane prattled on about dinner plans and nursery colors, a cold realization settled over me. She wasn't going to confess. They were going to keep lying, keep pretending, keep using me until I had nothing left to give. In that moment, any lingering doubts I had about my plan vanished. I thought of the evidence safely stored away, of Sarah Goldstein's confident smile, of Abby's unwavering support. You're right, Jane, I said, my voice steady. Family is everything, and I'm going to make sure mine is protected no matter what. Jane's smile faltered for a moment as if she sensed the shift in the air. But before she could respond, I was already walking away, my steps purposeful and my resolve ironclad. The time for gathering evidence was over. Now it was time to act. The pain hit me like a freight train, doubling me over as I clutched my swollen belly. This couldn't be happening. Not now, not when I was so close. Emily! Jane's voice, thick with concern, cut through the haze of agony. Oh my God, we need to get you to the hospital. I wanted to refuse, to push her away, but another wave of pain left me gasping. Before I knew it, I was in Jane's car, speeding towards the emergency room. The next few hours were a blur of doctors, nurses, and machines. False labor, they said. The baby was fine, but I needed to stay overnight for observation. As I lay in the sterile hospital bed, exhaustion and relief warred within me. Jane never left my side, playing the role of concerned sister-in-law to perfection. I've called Richard, she said, squeezing my hand. He's on his way. I nodded, too tired to maintain my facade of ignorance. As the pain medication kicked in, I felt my eyelids growing heavy. I must have dozed off because when I opened my eyes again, the room was dark. Jane was still there, but something had changed. The mask of concern had slipped, revealing a cold, calculating expression I'd never seen before. She was on the phone, speaking in hushed tones. Just a false alarm. No, she doesn't suspect anything. We're still in the clear. My heart raced as I realized she was talking to Richard. I kept my eyes nearly closed, feigning sleep as I strained to hear more. I know, Jane continued, irritation creeping into her voice. But we can't rush this. Emily trusts me completely. If we play our cards right, we can get everything. The house, the money, even custody of the baby. The words hit me like a physical blow. They weren't just having an affair. They were plotting to take everything from me, including my child. Don't worry, Jane said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. I'll make sure Emily never finds out. As far as she knows, I'm her rock, her only support. She'll never see it coming. As Jane ended the call, I fought to keep my breathing steady, my mind reeling. How could I have been so naive? I'd known about the affair, but this was beyond betrayal. Oh, you're awake, Jane said, her concerned mask back in place as she noticed my open eyes. How are you feeling, sweetie? I forced a weak smile. Better, thanks. Has Richard arrived yet? Jane's eyes flickered with something. Annoyance? Fear? Before she smoothed her features. Not yet, but he's on his way. Don't worry. I'm here for you. The irony of her words made me want to scream, but I swallowed it down. You're so good to me, Jane. I don't know what I'd do without you. She patted my hand, and it took every ounce of self-control not to recoil from her touch. That's what family is for, right? As Jane turned away to adjust my pillows, I caught sight of my phone on the bedside table. I needed to warn Abby, to tell her what I'd overheard. But how could I do it with Jane hovering over me? Just then, a nurse entered the room. Mrs. Harrison, we need to run a few more tests. I'm afraid I'll have to ask your sister-in-law to step out for a bit. Jane hesitated, but the nurse was insistent. As soon as the door closed behind her, I grabbed my phone with shaking hands. Abby, I whispered urgently into the voicemail. It's worse than we thought. They're not just having an affair. They're planning to take everything, including the baby. We need to move fast. Call me as soon as you get this. As I ended the call, a strange calm settled over me. The time for hesitation was over. Jane and Richard had shown their true colors, and now I knew exactly what I was up against. My baby kicked, as if sensing my resolve. I placed a protective hand over my belly, a fierce determination burning in my chest. Don't worry, little one, I murmured. Mommy's going to fix this, and heaven help anyone who tries to stand in our way. The day I decided to confront Richard dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the storm raging inside me. I'd rehearsed this conversation 1,000 times in my head, but nothing could have prepared me for the reality. I found him in his study, hunched over his laptop. He looked up as I entered, surprise flitting across his face. Emily, what are you doing here? We need to talk, Richard, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. About us, about Jane. The color drained from his face. What about Jane? I took a deep breath, steeling myself. I know about the affair. I know about your plans to take everything from me, including our baby. Richard's shock quickly morphed into anger. He stood up, towering over me. You've been spying on me? On us? I didn't have to, I shot back. You two weren't exactly subtle. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing the room like a caged animal. You don't understand, Emily. Things haven't been right between us for a long time. Jane, she gets me in a way you never did. The audacity of his words stung, but I held my ground. So that justifies betraying me? Planning to take our child? Richard's eyes narrowed. Oh, please. You pushed me into Jane's arms with your constant nagging, your neediness. This is as much your fault as it is mine. I felt as if I'd been slapped. My fault? I trusted you. I loved you. Love? Richard scoffed. You don't know the first thing about love. You're suffocating, Emily. Always have been. Jane, she lets me breathe. Each word was a dagger to my heart, but I refused to let him see me cry. And what about our baby? Were you really going to try to take custody? For a moment, something like guilt flashed in Richard's eyes, but it was quickly replaced by cold determination. I'd be a better parent than you. You're too emotional, too unstable. The baby would be better off with me and Jane. The room spun around me as the full weight of his betrayal hit home. This man, who I'd loved and trusted, was willing to destroy me completely. You're wrong, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. About everything, and I'm going to prove it. Richard laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. How? You've got nothing, Emily. No money, no job, nowhere to go. Face it, you need me. In that moment, something inside me snapped. The fear and hurt I'd been carrying for months transformed into a white-hot rage, but instead of lashing out, I felt an eerie calm settle over me. I looked Richard straight in the eye, my voice steady. You're right, I do need you. Confusion replaced the smugness on his face. What? I forced my lips into a trembling smile, channeling every ounce of acting ability I possessed. I can't do this alone, Richard. I'm scared. Can we try to work things out? For the baby's sake? Richard's expression softened, a triumphant gleam in his eye. He thought he'd won. Oh, Emily, of course we can. I knew you'd come around eventually. As he pulled me into an embrace, I fought the urge to recoil. Over his shoulder, I caught sight of a framed photo on his desk. Richard and Jane, laughing together at some party. My resolve hardened. Thank you, I whispered, my mind already racing with plans. You're right, family is everything. We need to stick together. As I left Richard's study, my hand instinctively went to my belly. Don't worry, little one, I murmured. Mommy's got this under control. I pulled out my phone, sending a quick text to Abby. It's done. He bought it. Time for phase 2. The game was on, and this time I was playing to win. Richard and Jane thought they had me cornered, but they were about to learn that a mother protecting her child was the most dangerous opponent of all. Let them think they'd won. I'd show them just how wrong they were. The weeks following my confrontation with Richard were a whirlwind of secret preparations and careful deceptions. On the surface, I played the role of the forgiving wife, smiling sweetly at Richard and Jane while my insides churned with disgust. "You're doing great, Em," Abby whispered during one of our clandestine meetings. "They don't suspect a thing." I nodded, my hand resting on my ever-growing belly. I just hope it's enough. With Abby's help and Sarah Goldstein's legal guidance, I began piecing together my new life. We found a modest apartment across town, far from Richard's reach. I started transferring small amounts of money from our joint account to a new one in my name only, careful not to raise any red flags. One afternoon, while Richard was at work and Jane was out shopping, I snuck into Richard's home office. My heart pounded as I copied financial documents and downloaded emails from his computer. Each piece of evidence was another nail in the coffin of their betrayal. As my due date approached, the pressure intensified. Richard and Jane grew more affectionate, more solicitous. Their saccharine concern made me want to scream, but I held it together, knowing the end was in sight. "We should start thinking about names," Richard said one evening, his hand on my stomach. It took every ounce of willpower not to flinch away. "Of course," I replied, forcing a smile. "I was thinking maybe Sarah for a girl." Jane, lounging nearby, perked up. "Oh, that's lovely. Sarah Harrison has a nice ring to it." I bit back a bitter laugh. If only they knew. The next day, I met with Sarah Goldstein to finalize our strategy. "Everything's in order," she assured me, her eyes gleaming with determination. "We've got them dead to rights, Emily. They won't know what hit them." As I left her office, a wave of dizziness washed over me. I steadied myself against a wall, taking deep breaths. The stress was taking its toll, but I couldn't falter now, not when I was so close. That night, as I lay in bed pretending to sleep, I overheard Richard on the phone with Jane. "It's almost time," he whispered. "Once the baby's born, we'll make our move. Emily won't know what hit her." Tears pricked my eyes, but I blinked them away. They thought they had me cornered, but they were in for a rude awakening. The next morning, I put the final pieces of my plan into motion. I called my boss, spinning a tale about needing extended leave due to pregnancy complications. In reality, I'd already secured a new job starting in a month, thanks to Abby's connections. As I packed a small bag with essentials, hiding it in the trunk of my car, a sudden pain gripped my abdomen. I gasped, clutching my belly. No, not now. It was too soon. Another contraction hit, stronger this time. Panic rose in my throat. This wasn't part of the plan. I wasn't ready. With shaking hands, I dialed Abby's number. "It's happening," I choked out. "The baby's coming." "Stay calm," Abby said, her voice steady. "I'm on my way. We can do this, Em. Just hold on." As I ended the call, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. The woman staring back at me looked terrified, but there was a steely determination in her eyes that I barely recognized. "We can do this," I whispered to my reflection, to my unborn child. "We're stronger than they think." Another contraction ripped through me, and I gritted my teeth against the pain. Time was up. Ready or not, my new life was about to begin. And Richard and Jane? They were about to learn that they'd underestimated me for the last time. The contractions were coming faster now, each one a reminder that time was running out. Abby burst through the door, her face a mix of panic and determination. "We need to go, Em, now." I nodded, gritting my teeth against another wave of pain. "The bag in the car." As Abby helped me to her car, I caught sight of Jane's SUV turning onto our street. My heart raced. We were cutting it too close. "Drive," I gasped as Abby started the engine. "Don't stop for anything." We peeled away, just as Jane pulled into the driveway. In the rearview mirror, I saw her confused face, phone already in hand. No doubt calling Richard. Between contractions, I fumbled with my phone, pulling up the pre-written message I'd prepared for this moment. With trembling fingers, I hit send. To Richard, "By the time you read this, I'll be gone. I know everything. The affair, your plans for our baby. It's over. Divorce papers are on the kitchen table. Don't try to find me." I switched off my phone, tossing it into my bag. There was no going back now. "Hospital?" Abby asked, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. I shook my head. No, the new apartment. Sarah's meeting us there. Abby's eyes widened. Em, are you sure? What if something goes wrong? Another contraction hit, and I clutched my belly. Nothing's going wrong. This baby and I, we're fighters. The next hour was a blur of pain and determination. We made it to the apartment where Sarah Goldstein was waiting with a midwife she'd arranged. As they helped me inside, I caught sight of my phone, lit up with missed calls and messages. I ignored it. Emily, Sarah said, her voice steady, I filed the papers. As of an hour ago, you're legally separated. Richard can't touch you or the baby without going through me. Relief washed over me, quickly replaced by another contraction. I screamed, the sound echoing off the bare walls of my new home. Hours passed in a haze of pain and pushing. Just when I thought I couldn't take any more, a new sound filled the room, the strong, healthy cry of my daughter. She's beautiful, Em, Abby whispered, tears in her eyes as she placed the tiny bundle in my arms. I looked down at my daughter's face, overcome with a love so fierce it took my breath away. Hello, Sarah, I murmured. Welcome to the world. As if on cue, a commotion erupted outside. Richard's voice, angry and desperate, carried through the door. Emily, I know you're in there. You can't do this. Sarah moved to the door, her voice cold and professional. Mr. Harrison, you're trespassing. Leave now, or I'll call the police. That's my child, Richard shouted. You can't keep me from my child. I held Sarah closer, my heart pounding. We'd known this moment would come, but the reality was terrifying. Emily, please, Richard's voice cracked. We can work this out. I'm sorry. I'll do anything. For a moment, I wavered. The pain in his voice tugged at something deep inside me. But then I looked down at Sarah, so small and vulnerable, and my resolve hardened. Tell him to leave, I said to Sarah Goldstein, my voice stronger than I felt. Tell him I'll contact him when I'm ready, not before. As Richard's pleas faded, replaced by the sound of police sirens, I felt a strange mix of triumph and sadness. This wasn't how I'd imagined bringing my child into the world, but it was the hand we'd been dealt. It's okay, little one, I whispered to Sarah. Mommy's got you, and I promise no one will ever hurt us again. As the adrenaline faded, exhaustion set in, but even as my eyes grew heavy, I knew one thing for certain. The hardest part was over. From here on out, Sarah and I would face the world together, on our own terms. And Richard? He was about to learn that he'd underestimated me for the last time. 6 months after Sarah's birth, I stood in front of the courthouse, my heart pounding. Today was the final hearing for my divorce and custody case. Richard had fought tooth and nail, but thanks to Sarah Goldstein's expert handling and the mountain of evidence I'd gathered, we were confident. Ready? Abby asked, squeezing my hand. I nodded, adjusting Sarah in her carrier. As I'll ever be. Inside, Richard and Jane sat on the opposite side of the courtroom. Richard looked haggard, his once immaculate suit rumpled. Jane avoided my gaze, her face a mask of guilt and defiance. As the judge entered, I took a deep breath. This was it, the moment that would define our future. The proceedings flew by, in a blur of legal jargon and emotional testimony. Richard pleaded for joint custody, claiming he'd changed, that he deserved a chance to be a father. But when presented with the evidence of his affair and his plans to take Sarah away from me, his arguments crumbled. Finally, the judge cleared her throat. In light of the evidence presented, I hereby grant full custody of Sarah Harrison to Emily Harrison, with Richard Harrison granted supervised visitation rights. Relief washed over me, so intense I nearly collapsed. We'd done it. Sarah was safe. As we left the courthouse, Richard approached, his eyes red-rimmed. Emily, please, can we talk? Part of me wanted to ignore him, to walk away and never look back. But as I looked down at Sarah, peacefully sleeping in her carrier, I realized something. She deserved to know her father, even if he'd made terrible mistakes. You can see her, I said, my voice steady, but only under supervision, and only if you agree to counseling. Richard's face crumpled with relief and gratitude. Thank you, Emily. I promise. I'll do better. As he walked away, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. Back at my new apartment, I was surprised to find my neighbor Sarah waiting with a homemade casserole. Over the past months, she'd become a dear friend, always there with a kind word or a helping hand. I thought you might need this after today, she said, her smile warm. As we sat talking over dinner, Sarah suddenly grew serious. Emily, there's something I need to tell you. I'm not just a neighbor. I'm actually a family mediator and therapist. I blinked, surprised. Why didn't you say anything before? Sarah shrugged. I wanted to be your friend first, but now I think I might be able to help. If you're interested, I could mediate between you and Richard, help you both learn to co-parent effectively. I considered her offer, thinking of Richard's broken expression at the courthouse. I think I'd like that, for Sarah's sake. As Sarah left that evening, I stood by the window, watching the sunset. So much had changed in a year. I'd lost a husband, gained a daughter, and discovered a strength I never knew I possessed. I looked down at Sarah, sleeping peacefully in her crib. We did it, little one, I whispered. It's just you and me now, but we've got this. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Co-parenting with Richard, building a new career, raising Sarah on my own, each day would bring new challenges. But for the first time in months, I felt truly hopeful. I was Emily Harrison, single mother, survivor, and fighter. And I was ready for whatever life threw my way next. As I crawled into bed that night, I smiled to myself. The Emily who had started this journey, scared, betrayed, and unsure, was gone. In her place stood a woman who had faced her worst fears and come out stronger. Tomorrow would bring new battles, new joys, new sorrows, but I was ready for them all, because now I knew the truth. I was capable of so much more than I'd ever imagined. And with Sarah by my side, there was nothing we couldn't face together.